Welcome to Vlog 2, Skills and Capacities in Speed and Agility. So for this assignment, I've opted for the depth rather than breadth approach, and I'm going to be focusing on the acceleration aspect for both the individuals examined. And that's because acceleration should be the focus for team sport athletes, because errors made here will sew up seeds for errors made at top speed. This is Amy. She's a former Wales under-18 rugby union athlete doing some 10-metre accelerations. When accelerating, the most favourable impulse profile is one in which sufficient vertical impulse is generated to overcome gravity and create a flight time long enough for the repositioning of the lower limbs, whilst all other strength reserves are applied horizontally in order to maximise acceleration. With regards to the starting position, Amy has responded well to the need to have a straight line from the back of her head down to the heel on her foot. Amy is also orientating her centre of mass forward and driving the heel backwards and downwards to create an equal and opposite reaction to propel herself forwards. By Amy's fourth stride, her body position is notably more upright than it was in her first stride. And a classic coaching error here would be to tell Amy to keep leaning forward throughout the first 6 steps of the acceleration. Indeed, according to J.B. Marin, it is an important skill to be able to orient your force vector forwards. However, more forward lean means more bend of the legs, but this is problematic if the individual is poor at expressing force, and Amy doesn't have access to a gym and is not well trained. Amy is also compensating for the lack of forward lean with flexion in the thoracic spine. This not only gives her the illusion of feeling lower to the ground than she really is, but it also indicates a lack of strength in her trunk to resist the downward rotational forces of gravity as she accelerates. All considered, it would seem Amy's main issue is a lack of capacity for force expression. And it's worth considering Charlie Francis, who says to go faster you need more force. The more force you apply, the higher you will rise off the ground. This is consistent with a study from Barr et al. 2014, who compared 20 slow versus 20 fast Canadian international rugby players and found that faster players had greater levels of relative strength and power than slow players. The main focus is maximum strength, which will improve the cross-sectional area, leading to more muscle and ultimately more leg extensor force, which will develop vertical impulse quicker and allow her to travel at higher speeds. But due to Amy's relative inexperience in the weight room, this would best be achieved through general training means, such as squats, leg pressing, and isolation exercises. So all weight room interventions are capable of having a positive, neutral, or even negative effect. And strength training is also going to have a U-shaped curve. More experienced lifters may wish to eventually combine plyometrics, such as the triple broad jump, which is also strongly correlated with acceleration ground contact time. Although I wouldn't prescribe triple broad jumps for Amy yet, however, some plyometrics would be useful because she was guilty of overstriding, which is perhaps not surprising because she hasn't been taught acceleration before. Low intensity plyometrics are useful for emphasizing elements of the skill while also developing aerobic contractile endurance, whereby oxygenated blood can be delivered to the hamstrings, building robustness, while progressively overloading the forces transmitted through the Achilles tendon. This is Katie, another Wales under-18 rugby union athlete, and she has a skill issue during acceleration. So during acceleration, the skill is in matching the timing of the peak forward swing velocity of the recovery leg with the peak hip extension velocity on the support side. This has the effect of reducing contraction velocity of our hip extensors at mid-stance. So during acceleration, it is normal to see an increase in heel recovery in the first few strides. However, the recovery of Katie's swing foot shouldn't be higher than the knee height. At this extreme, Katie will struggle to get forward momentum from her recovery leg at the right time. This has the knock-on effect of slowing down the velocity of travel of the torso, which then has a knock-on effect of slowing the hip extension rate that's occurring on the stance leg. This may also contribute to Katie's overstriding. Suitable coaching cues would include telling Katie to keep her toes close to the ground between each stride. It may be possible to place cones for her to kick over, however it may not be wise to impose such a low heel recovery that might not be best suited to her. But by learning how to bound, Katie will also learn a pattern that requires the shin to swing lower to the ground. As previously mentioned, improving technical aspects through plyometrics can also deliver structural changes, which together can slow contraction velocity and enhance our ability to express force effectively. There is also an argument for capacity limitations, because high heel recovery is also associated in weak individuals with elastic musculoskeletal properties. Katie has a reasonably high training age. She can squat 1.5 times her body weight, and she performs Olympic lifts, which are no doubt developing her mechanical power output during the second pull, as well as her yielding strength during the catch phase. However, considering stiff and coordinated biarticular muscles, such as the iliopsoas, glutes, vastus, and soleus, are needed in order to transmit energy effectively across joints and limb segments, some practitioners do advocate the use of isometric circuits, which provide an overload to these muscle groups. Otherwise, the burden of transmitting energy is put on the monoarticular muscles, which are less effective in this area. And now we're moving on to the agility part of the assignment. So agility involves a rapid whole body movement with changes in velocity and the maintenance of balance while responding to a stimulus. So looking at this deterministic model of agility performance, we will be ignoring the perceptual and decision-making side in this assignment, but we should note that they are separate but important elements. Indeed, without context, there is no meaning. But it is our responsibility to develop skills and capacities which give the athlete the ability to draw from these as much as they need to in order to achieve a given skill on the pitch. The research lacks a technical model, but common technique areas to discuss include posture, positioning of the feet, and body lean. This is Scott, a rugby player for the Navy, performing the 505 agility test. And we're going to be focusing on the turn aspect, less so the acceleration. And the first thing that we can see is that upon approaching the turning line, the shoulders, hips are behind his feet, which is not optimal because Scott cannot easily change his orientation so easily. This is crucial during acute turning, which requires Scott to open his hips in the direction of the camera, followed by a cross step or bringing over the far leg. However, Scott struggles visibly to extend his hip during the acceleration from the start position, but also from the turn position, instead making a series of quarter turns before accelerating to the finish. Screening revealed Scott could perform 10 pogo jumps without a significant increase in contact time, suggesting that he had sufficient ankle stiffness to control and transmit force during the acceleration and deceleration required for the turn. However, his overhead squat indicated a lack of hip mobility, where he could not achieve his usual depth of below parallel. After some stretching exercises that restored his hip mobility, Scott was able to complete the 505 agility test with a much more acute turning circle. Joe, much like Scott, also has his shoulders and hips behind the feet during the deceleration aspect, which we already know will affect the orientation of the body. But the interesting thing here is that Joe is very strong and is able to produce a large amount of force, but screening has revealed that he has no problems in mobility with an overhead squat, but the contact times during repeated pogo jumps is very significant. Therefore, it is possible that Joe is suffering from a capacity issue related to a lack of rate of force development and reactive strength. As previously mentioned, improving technical aspects through plyometrics can also deliver structural changes. This is yet another example of the complex interplay between skills and capacities. To summarize, this assignment asked me to identify if a movement's shortcomings were due to a skill or capacity issue, when in fact, all the exercises have been restrained by a mixture of both, and it is the context which determines which factor is more prevalent.